He thought the alien was a predator. Turns out she's more vulnerable than the exozoologist. The debriefing chamber aboard Lysara outpost hummed with tension, the chill in the air more psychological than environmental. The overhead lighting was crisp, almost surgical, painting the metal walls in stark relief. Rowan sat ramrod straight, palms pressed to the tabletop's cold surface as the station's director, Director Meredith, leaned forward, eyes sharp as cut glass. A slate slid across the table, halting inches from Rowan's hands. Meredith's tone was clipped, every syllable honed with warning. Your predecessor, Dr. Merrick, failed by projecting empathy onto the subject. She tapped the slate with a lacquered nail. He mistook reflex for reason. That error cost lives. Your task is to avoid his mistake. Subject 119 is a hunter, the last survivor from a Corellian raider vessel destroyed in orbit. She is swift, formidable, and lethally unpredictable. We need to learn how to neutralize her. This is not a rescue mission. Rowan's fingers hovered over the slate, its screen pulsing with surveillance feeds and medical reports. If I may ask, Director, he ventured, what exactly? Observe, document, recommend solutions, Mareth cut him off. Don't humanize her, don't get attached, that's all. She stood, the chair scraping against the floor. Debriefing ends here. Your work begins now. Left alone, Rowan exhaled, tension uncoiling from his shoulders. He picked up the slate and scrolled through the files. The screen flickered with video. Within the sterile expanse of Habitat Dome 4, a creature of wild, captivating menace prowled. Fur gleamed copper and ivory under the harsh artificial lights, every strand catching and scattering the glow. Her face was sharp, fox-like, with a narrow snout and twitching pointed ears. Amber eyes glimmered, feral yet calculating. Two bushy tails lashed behind her, the movement both beautiful and dangerous. Rowan watched as she circled the perimeter, claws scraping at the reinforced glass. A low, guttural snarl vibrated through the speakers. According to the intercepted Corellian logs, her name was Lyra. He whispered it under his breath, feeling the shape of it on his tongue. Lyra. Not Subject 119. Rowan's pulse quickened with each new angle, Lyra leaping with balletic violence, twisting midair to land on silent paws. There was a living contradiction in her. Every movement was both a threat and a marvel, every snarl underscored by a grace that drew the eye, even as it warned him away. His first day in the observation lab, Rowan stood behind mirrored glass, the hum of the monitoring equipment a constant background drone. He jotted notes as Lyra paced, her twin tails flicking in agitation. Mareth's words echoed in his mind. Do not mistake reflex for reason. But Rowan's eyes caught the subtle tremor in her left paw, the slight wince that shadowed her features after each charge at the barrier. He leaned closer, fingers curled around his stylus. She's injured, he murmured, almost to himself. More like pretending to be, replied one of the guards, arms folded over his chest. She's played that trick before. Don't fall for it. But Rowan watched as Lyra sank to her haunches, sides heaving, amber gaze darting restlessly from shadow to shadow. She licked at the paw, quick and furtive, as though ashamed to display any weakness. Every so often, she pressed her head to the floor, eyes squeezed shut, tails curled protectively around her body. Rowan catalogued her patterns, the relentless pacing from corner to corner, the sudden, explosive bursts of energy where she launched herself against the dome walls, the way she stilled when the lights dimmed, as if waiting for some signal only she could hear. Yet beneath the violence was an unmistakable undercurrent. Distress, pain, confusion. In the days that followed, Rowan's world shrank to the sterile confines of the observation lab and the endless loop of Lyra's surveillance feeds. He tracked her aggression in meticulous detail, noting how her snarls lengthened into howls as the days wore on, how her attacks on the glass grew weaker, how she began to pace through the night, never sleeping, eyes wide with haunted alertness. Reports from the medical scans troubled him. Lyra's wounds healed at impossible speeds, slashes closed, bruises faded, but for every injury that vanished, new ones appeared, almost as if her own body was at war with itself. Rowan pored over the data. Her cellular regeneration rates were off the charts, yet the same cells broke down rapidly, faster than he had seen in any terrestrial species. No infection, no genetic defect. The puzzle gnawed at him. He pulled up the environmental logs, comparing the atmospheric composition of the dome to Corellian standards. Everything matched, or almost everything. Something small, something essential, was missing. Rowan stood by the glass late into the night, watching Lyra curl into herself, tails wrapped tight, breath shuddering in the cold glow of the habitat lights. She was no monster, no mindless beast, not just a weapon or a threat. She was suffering, trapped in a cage that healed her wounds but stripped away whatever she needed to truly survive. He set down his stylus, meeting her gaze through the glass. In that moment, as her amber eyes flicked up to meet his, Rowan stopped seeing Lyra as a monster. He saw her as a living being in torment. And though he knew what the director had said, he couldn't unsee her pain, nor the silent plea for understanding buried within it. The breakthrough came when Rowan decrypted a damaged log from the Corellian ship, a record of their homeworld, Siriel. He hunched over the cracked terminal in the dim-lit corner of his quarters, sweat beading at his brow as lines of alien script flickered and stuttered across the screen. A sliver of sound, staticky and distant, played in the background, a language that was more music than words. He leaned closer, heart racing. The log was a digital journal, its metadata suggesting it belonged to Lyra herself, or perhaps a kin. Across the grainy hollows, images blossomed, a world swathed in night, blanketed by vast fungal forests, glowing with blue and violet light. Luminous filaments stretched across the landscape, their tendrils pulsing in waves. The text described Siriel as a place where the air shimmered with living spores, where every breath was a communion with the world itself. Rowan's mind raced as he cross-referenced the information with Lyra's medical records and symptoms. He isolated key phrases: symbiosis, spore resonance, neural equilibrium. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. He ran simulations on the outpost's medical AI, inputting the variables: Corellian physiology, the presence and absence of Sirielian spores. The results were devastating. Without the spores, Lyra's neural chemistry failed. Her regenerative abilities, meant to heal, became a curse. Cells rebuilt and decayed in a vicious cycle, flooding her body with toxins. Pain, constant and unendurable, racked her muscles and bones. Her aggression, her unpredictable violence, it was not willful. It was the agony of deprivation, the body's desperate attempt to survive in an alien, barren air. The realization hit Rowan like a physical blow. The dome was not just a cage, it was an unintentional torture chamber, stripping away everything Lyra needed to exist. He watched her from the observation window, hands pressed to the glass. Lyra curled in on herself, twin tails limp and motionless. Her breath came in ragged shudders, every muscle tight with suffering. Occasionally, a low, mournful whine vibrated through the sensors, so soft it was almost lost in the hum of the dome's filtration system. Guilt gnawed at Rowan. He was her jailer, complicit in her torment. He thought of director Meredith's words: "Don't humanize her, don't get attached." But how could he not, now that he knew? Every day he watched her suffer, the lie of neutrality poisoned his resolve. Desperate, Rowan searched for any way to ease her pain. He scoured the outpost's archives for environmental data from Sirael, compiling every fragment of audio, every snippet of video, every chemical profile he could find. One night, he slipped into the comms lab and loaded a recording into the dome's speakers, a symphony of Siraelian wind and the distant haunting calls of unseen creatures. He watched, breath held, as the first notes drifted through the habitat. Lyra lifted her head, ears pricking forward. The restless agitation in her movements faded. For a moment, her posture softened, her tail stirring with the faintest memory of grace. Rowan's voice was little more than a whisper. "Do you hear it?" he murmured, as if she could sense his presence. "Does it remind you of home?" He upped the volume slightly, letting the sound wash over her. Lyra moved closer to the source, nostrils flaring, amber eyes wide with longing. She pressed her head to the speaker, eyes fluttering closed, and the whine that escaped her was one of aching hope rather than pain. Encouraged, Rowan pressed further. He spent sleepless nights programming the outpost's old holoprojector, cobbling together a simulation of Siriel's bioluminescent fungus from the fragments in the Corellian logs. The next morning, he projected it onto the dome's floor, a swirling pool of violet and indigo light, filaments waving gently as if stirred by an invisible breeze. Lyra watched from the shadows, tense and wary. Gradually, curiosity won out. She crept forward, her claws clicking softly against the glassy surface. When she reached the center of the projection, she stretched out a trembling paw and pressed it to the luminous image. Her tail swayed, slow and uncertain, and her amber eyes filled with a yearning that was almost too raw to bear. Rowan felt a lump rise in his throat. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "You miss it. You miss them." As the days passed, Lyra lingered near the hologram whenever it played, sometimes lying beside it, eyes closed, as if dreaming of another world. The audio, wind and distant voices, became a balm, softening her posture, easing the tremors in her limbs. Rowan knew it wasn't enough. She needed the spores, the true chemical communion of her home, but at least he could offer her this fleeting comfort. Driven by the need to understand, Rowan dug deeper into the outpost's sealed records. He bypassed the firewalls on Merrick's terminal, heart pounding as he accessed the hidden logs. What he found made him reel. The official narrative, the one Merrick had drilled into every mind on Lysara outpost, claimed that Dr. Merrick and his team had died by Lyra's claws during a containment breach. But the true records told a different story: a panicked boarding, blaster fire ricocheting through the corridors, screams and confusion as the Corellian ship was torn apart by the outpost's security drones. Merrick's team had perished in the chaos of the crossfire, not at Lyra's hands. She had fought to survive, injured and cornered, but she had not killed. Rowan stared at the evidence, fury and grief warring within him. The director had twisted the truth, weaponized Lyra's suffering to justify her continued captivity and study. Rowan's jaw clenched as he scrolled through the logs, recordings of Merrick's orders, her calculated edits to the mission reports, her cold, clinical voice stripping away every trace of Lyra's personhood. He slammed the terminal shut, chest heaving. "You lied to all of us," he whispered into the empty room. "You lied to me." With the truth burning in his mind, Rowan returned to the observation dome. Lyra was waiting for him, pressed against the glass, eyes searching. There was no violence in her now, only exhaustion and a wary hope. He placed his palm against the barrier, fingers spread. Lyra mirrored the gesture, her paw meeting his hand through the cold, invisible wall. For a long moment, they stayed that way, hunter and scientist, prisoner and jailer, separated by more than reinforced glass. Rowan's voice was steady, but quiet. "I won't let them hurt you anymore," he promised. "Not for their lies, not for their fear." He watched her, saw the faintest flicker of trust dawn in her gaze. The decision crystallized inside him, solid, unbreakable. He could not erase the pain she had endured, nor the guilt he carried for his own complicity, but he would not add to it. He would not be her executioner. He turned from the glass, resolve settling over him like armor. There was work to be done, a plan to be made, and lines he would no longer cross. As he walked away, Lyra watched him, her amber eyes shining with a glimmer of something that might one day become hope. By day, Rowan filed careful reports, downplaying Lyra's changes. His entries became models of studied detachment. Subject 119 exhibits minor behavioral improvements. Aggression remains within expected parameters. Suggest further observation. He attached old surveillance footage to support the illusion of status quo, cropping out the moments when Lyra's pain eased and her eyes searched for him at the window. He erased the traces of hope, burying the truth beneath layers of bureaucracy. By night, Rowan slipped through the dim corridors of Lysara Outpost, heart pounding as he keyed in stolen access codes. In the biofabrication lab, the hush was absolute, broken only by the low hum of machinery. He loaded the sequenced Cyralian genome into the outpost's biofabricators, fingers trembling as he set the parameters. Every step was a risk, every line of code a potential red flag for station security. Sweat beaded at his brow as he masked his work behind maintenance subroutines and routine calibrations. One slip, he knew, and alarms would sound. The director would descend, cold and merciless, and Lyra's suffering would become permanent. But Rowan pressed on, driven by the memory of Lyra's suffering. The echo of her low, broken whines haunted him, a sound he could never unhear. He watched the nutrient media swirl in the synthesis chamber, spores budding in fractal patterns, glowing faintly blue under the lab lights. The process took days, then weeks, each trial a gamble, each failure a blow. He spent hours at the glass, his voice pitched low and gentle. "Hold on, Lyra. I'm trying to help you," he whispered, watching her curled form stir at the sound of his voice. Sometimes, when the station slept, he would sit with his back against the wall, knees pulled up, as Lyra pressed close to the other side, their presence separated by a pain but joined in silent solidarity. The work became personal. Rowan learned the intricacies of her biology, mapping every nuance of her reactions, how her ears would flick in irritation when the air grew too dry, how her pupils widened when the simulated wind played. A fragile bond formed through shared pain and hope. He sketched her in his notebook, tracing the elegant curve of her tails, the delicate arch of her brow. She watched him with wary curiosity, her amber eyes reflecting the lab lights, sometimes mirroring his own longing. Late at night, Rowan read to her, stories from Earth soft and lulling. "There's a place called the Northern Lights," he would say, "where the sky glows with color and people stand for hours, just watching." Lyra cocked her head, tails twitching in rhythm to his words, as if absorbing the music of his voice. After weeks of trial and error, the day arrived. Rowan loaded the synthesized spores into the environmental systems, disguising the procedure as a routine atmospheric calibration. He checked and rechecked every setting, palms clammy as the timer ticked down. Surveillance bots hovered nearby, their red lenses unblinking. Rowan's mouth was dry, but he forced a casual nod at the passing technician, heart pounding so loud he was certain it would give him away. The spores dispersed with a hiss, invisible in the recycled air. Rowan hurried to the observation dome, breath shallow, afraid to hope. Inside, Lyra lay listless, her tails limp, eyes half closed. Then suddenly, she inhaled, deeply, desperately. Her nose twitched. A shudder ran through her body as if she'd been doused in warm rain. Ears perked, eyes widened, and her entire frame seemed to unfold. For the first time since her capture, she stood without trembling, her posture tall and proud. She approached the glass, slow and deliberate, every motion deliberate with newfound strength. She pressed her hand, delicate clawed fingers splayed, against the barrier. Rowan moved closer, mirroring the gesture. Their hands aligned, palm to palm, separated only by the cold, invisible wall. Lyra's amber eyes met his. There was no rage, only gratitude and relief, a warmth that cut through Rowan's guilt and fear. In that instant, everything changed. He was no longer her captor, no longer a shadow at the edge of her suffering. He was her savior. From that day, as Lyra recovered, her true nature emerged. Gone was the wild, wounded creature of the first weeks. In her place was someone inquisitive, quick-witted, and, when she felt safe, surprisingly gentle. She studied Rowan as much as he studied her, mimicking the way he tilted his head or traced patterns on the glass. When he offered her puzzles, simple objects, blocks that fit together, colored cubes, she solved them in seconds, her tails flicking in triumph. "Clever girl," Rowan said, a genuine smile breaking across his tired face. Lyra's ears flicked at his tone, and she pressed her brow to the glass in what Rowan came to understand as affection. He began teaching her simple human words, writing them on the glass with grease pencils. Light, safe, friend. Lyra copied the symbols, sometimes making her own, looping glyphs from her own language, tracing them with a claw tip. She showed him the meaning with gestures, touching her chest for I, flicking her tails for happy, a graceful sweep of her hand for peace. Some nights, when the station's lights dimmed and the world outside grew still, Lyra would perform the shirakai, the ritual dance of her people. She circled the dome with deliberate steps, tails weaving intricate patterns, each movement imbued with memory and longing. Rowan watched, breathless, as she leapt and spun, her fur glowing in the bioluminescent shimmer he had recreated for her. When she finished, she bowed her head toward him, and Rowan pressed his hand to the glass, whispering, "Beautiful. You're beautiful, Lyra." Their communication blossomed, a silent language of trust. Lyra learned to signal when she was hungry, when she wanted music, when she longed for silence. Rowan responded in kind, adjusting her spore doses, tailoring her diet with nutrients he imported from other sectors. He delighted in her playful responses, the way she would toss a block in the air, catch it with her tails, and flash him a sly, fanged smile. He became her caretaker, her confidant, and, though the word went unspoken, her beloved. Each day, the boundaries of the sterile lab receded, replaced by warmth and laughter. Lyra teased him, tapping at the glass to startle him when he was lost in thought. He responded with stories of his youth, tales of rainstorms and sunlit fields. Sometimes, when words failed, they simply sat in silence, sharing the small comfort of presence. Their conversations stretched late into the night. Rowan would sit cross-legged on the floor, sketchbook in hand, while Lyra curled beside the glass, twin tails wrapped around her. He spoke softly, telling her of his hopes, his regrets, and his dreams. Lyra listened, her gaze unwavering, her breath a soft counterpoint to the rhythm of his words. One night, as he recounted a childhood memory, Lyra reached up, pressing her palm to the glass in invitation. Rowan mirrored her, heart aching with a longing he had never known before. In that moment, the sterile walls of the lab faded, replaced by the promise of something new, something that transcended fear and captivity. The balance of power had shifted. Love, cautious and fierce, grew in the sterile lab, rooting itself in every shared glance, every whispered word. Rowan no longer saw a subject or an experiment, but a soul, wounded, resilient, and radiant. And as Lyra's twin tails curled contentedly beneath the soft lights, Rowan knew that he too had found a home. The director noticed Lyra's transformation. He loomed in the observation lab, voice icy with suspicion as he circled Rowan. "You've tamed my primary subject," he accused, each word a blade. "Command is impressed, but not for the reasons you'd hope. They want to test the new neurotoxin on her, a live trial, scheduled for 48 hours from now." Rowan's heart lurched. "She isn't a weapon. She's sentient, suffering. The protocol." The director's lips curled in disdain. "The protocol is whatever command decides. You will prepare her, or we'll find someone who will." He turned on his heel and strode away, leaving the lab colder and emptier than before. For a moment, Rowan stood rooted, fists clenched. He pressed his forehead to the glass, watching Lyra trace patterns in the condensation with a tired claw. 48 hours. He could already see the tremor in her hands, the slow wilt of her posture as the spore doses waned. There would be no more reprieves. He forced himself to move, mind racing. If he waited, Lyra would die, used up, discarded, another secret in Lysara's archives. He would not let it happen. That night, Rowan entered the dome under the guise of routine maintenance. He crouched beside the glass, tracing a series of symbols on his slate and pressing it against the barrier. Danger. Escape. Together. He drew a schematic of the station. Corridors. Ducts. The hangar marked with a star. Lyra watched, her ears swiveling, tails twitching with mounting resolve. Her amber gaze met his, and she nodded once, sharp and sure. Rowan exhaled. They understood each other. He spent the next day preparing. He mapped the guard rotations, studied the maintenance hatches, memorized the security override codes he had once sworn never to use. He downloaded the hangar's access protocols and concealed a single injector of concentrated cerulean spore serum in his sleeve. Every moment he risked exposure. His hands shook as he filed his final report, eyes darting to every camera and shadow. At 0200 hours, Rowan moved. He triggered a systems blackout, plunging the outpost into total darkness. Alarms blinked red, klaxons stuttering as the lights flickered and died. Emergency protocols would hold the crew in their quarters for 6 minutes, just enough. Inside the habitat dome, the locks disengaged with a shudder. Lyra slipped through the hatch, her form a ghost in the gloom. She moved like liquid shadow, every step precise, ears alert for the smallest sound. Rowan met her in the corridor, heart pounding. "This way," he breathed, leading her through the twisting maze. At the first security junction, he bypassed the sensor grid, palms slick on the console. Lyra pressed close behind, her breath warm on his neck. A guard appeared. Rowan's heart froze, but Lyra surged forward, a blur of copper and white. She knocked the man out with a careful blow, lowering him gently to the floor before signaling Rowan onward. They hurried down narrow service passages, weaving through darkness and chaos. Occasionally, Lyra paused, her body trembling as pain flared. She was weakening, the spore's effects fading under stress. "Almost there," Rowan whispered, guiding her with urgent hands. A pair of guards rounded the corner. Lyra dropped low, eyes narrowed, tails lashing. She feinted left, then right, incapacitating both with swift, non-lethal strikes. Rowan watched her, awe mingling with fear. She was grace and fury in equal measure, every movement forged by necessity. As they neared the final security checkpoint, the alarms crescendoed, crimson lights bathing the corridor. Lyra stumbled, catching herself on the wall, a low whine escaping her throat. Rowan caught her before she fell, his voice desperate. "Lyra, hold on!" She looked at him, pain clouding her gaze, but trust still shone there. Without hesitation, Rowan withdrew the injector, pressed it gently to her neck, and released the dose. The serum hissed into her bloodstream, and within seconds, her breathing steadied. She rose, determination returning to her stance. Together, they burst through the checkpoint, Rowan disabling the last set of sensors with a coded sequence. They sprinted down the final corridor as security teams converged, the clang of boots echoing behind them. The hangar doors loomed ahead, the silver comet waiting on the launch pad. Rowan's only gamble, a battered courier he'd modified in secret months before. Blaster fire lit up the bay. Lyra pushed Rowan aside, moving with inhuman speed as energy bolts scorched the air. She deflected a stun baton with a snarl, her claws slashing the weapon from a guard's grasp before he could fire. Rowan ducked beneath a control panel, entering the override sequence. "Hurry!" Lyra called, her voice raw. Rowan finished the last code, and the comet's ramp hissed open. He seized Lyra's hand, pulling her up the gangway as a final volley of bolts crackled overhead. The hatch sealed behind them, and Rowan raced to the cockpit, Lyra close on his heels. He strapped in, hands flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, a tremor shuddering through the hull as he powered up the launch sequence. Come on," he muttered, glancing at the scanners. Security teams flooded the hangar, the director's voice barking orders over the comm. "Override confirmed," the ship's AI intoned, voice cool and calm in the chaos. Rowan slammed the thrusters. The silver comet surged upward, breaking free from the outpost's gravity well. In the viewport, Lysara Outpost shrank, a lonely spire of metal and cold light, receding into the dark. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Only the hum of the engines and the wild pounding of Rowan's heart filled the cockpit. Then Lyra was beside him. She reached for him, her furred hand gentle against his cheek. Her amber eyes shimmered, hope and relief mingling in their depths. She parted her lips, voice trembling with effort and wonder. "Rowan," she whispered, her first human word. Emotion choked him. He cupped her hand in his own. "Lyra," he answered, voice thick with gratitude and awe. Their hands met, fingers entwining, a promise forged in flight. The old wall, captor and captive, crumbled, replaced by something new and fierce and free. They were fugitives now, partners, lovers, bound not by circumstance, but by choice. Lyra gazed at the star map, claws trailing over the glowing constellations. She tapped a cluster, Sirael, her homeworld, the source of her pain and her hope. She looked to Rowan, silent question in her eyes. Rowan set the course, his heart pounding with fear and with hope. The silver comet leapt into the dark, carrying them toward the unknown, together, at last, 5 years later. On Sirael, time flowed differently, subtle and fluid, measured not in seasons but in cycles of bloom and spore, in the luminous waxing and waning of the living world. Rowan was transformed. The human exozoologist was gone, replaced by someone stronger, sun-kissed by Sirael's gentle light, his frame honed from years of labor and learning. He wore Corellian fabrics now, soft, iridescent weaves that shimmered with every movement, their intricate patterns a sign of belonging. Among the Corellians, he was called Star Healer, the one who understood pain, who had crossed the chasm of otherness to become kin. Sira, once Lyra, stood at his side, her name now a title of reverence. Clan matriarch and council voice, her twin tails, thick and elegant, marked her as a leader, her scars a living record of survival and wisdom. Children watched her with awe as she moved through the city's glowing mycelial streets, her every step a lesson in poise and strength. Their home was woven from living light. The city grew in harmony with the vast fungal forests, towers and bridges sculpted from radiant mycelium that pulsed with slow, steady life. Rowan woke each morning to the scent of earth and spore, and to Sira's gentle presence beside him, her fur soft against his skin, her breath even and calm. It was a life shaped by hard-won peace. By day, Rowan moved through the city's bustling labs and classrooms, lending his knowledge to the future of Sirael. He helped develop spore supplements for Corellians who braved the emptiness between worlds, ensuring that no one would suffer as Sira had. He worked with elders to decode fragments of ancient technology left by forgotten ancestors, piecing together secrets of navigation, flight, and healing. In return, he learned to sense the rhythms of the living planet, the subtle communication of mycelial networks, the quiet wisdom of the wind, the way the world itself seemed to breathe. His work was never solitary. Children clustered around him, eager for stories of stars and strange worlds. "Can you really fly through the dark?" they asked, eyes wide. Rowan laughed, demonstrating the constellations with his hands, while Sira watched from the doorway, pride shining in her gaze. Sira's role was larger still. As matriarch, she taught the young discipline, not anger, but the art of control. Her movements were a dance, sparring in the clearing beneath the bioluminescent canopy, demonstrating the Shirakai ritual with a patience born of pain. "Strength is not wildness," she instructed, her voice low and steady. "It is knowing when to wait and when to strike." Rowan watched her with a fierce, aching pride. Their love, once hidden in shadow, was now an open secret. He, the fragile human who had soothed their fiercest daughter, and she, the warrior matriarch who had taught him to listen for the song beneath the silence. Sometimes Sira would reach for his hand in public, her tails brushing against his legs as she passed. The gesture was simple, but to the Corellians, it was a symbol, one that spoke of trust, of healing, of the possibility of peace. Yet peace was fragile. One evening, as the city glowed in twilight, word came of a human vessel at the system's edge. It appeared on the Skywatcher's instruments, a cold metal shape, hanging in the void. The council gathered in the spore-lit hall, voices sharp with fear and memory. Old wounds gaped open at the news. "They come to claim what they failed to destroy," one elder hissed, claws drumming on the council table. "Their ships brought fire and pain before. Must we wait to see what this one brings?" Others called for war, their words laced with pain. "We are strong now. Let them fear us for once." Rowan stood among them, exposed and small, his heart a drumbeat of dread. He glanced at Sira. Her face was calm, but her tails curled tight with tension. He longed to reach for her, but in the council, custom demanded restraint. Sira stepped forward, voice ringing with authority. "Enough," she said. "We will not be ruled by ghosts. I have felt the agony of captivity. I have known what it is to be hunted, to be called monster. But I have also known compassion, across the gulf of difference, in the heart of an enemy." She turned to Rowan, her gaze gentle but unflinching. "A single fallen tree does not define the forest. Nor does a single act define a people." Rowan swallowed his fear and stepped to her side, his voice steady but vulnerable. "I cannot speak for all my kind. I can only offer myself, my truth, my regret, my hope." He looked into the council's many eyes. "I once helped bring harm, and I would give anything to undo it. But I have learned from Sira, from all of you, let us not become the thing we fear." Sira reached for his hand. He took it, feeling the strength and warmth in her grasp. The chamber hushed. Their clasped hands, fur and skin, claw and palm, became a symbol, a living argument against hatred. Whispers rippled through the council, old faces softening. "Let us speak before we fight," Sira said, her voice softer now. "Let us offer a story, and ask for one in return." The council, moved by their words and the proof of their bond, agreed. They would try for peace. That night, anxiety twisted in Rowan's chest, a storm he could not banish. He stood on their balcony, watching the distant stars, mind spinning with possibilities, memories of betrayal and violence, hope battered by fear. Sira found him there, her silhouette haloed by the city's glow. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, her chin resting lightly on his shoulder. "You are trembling, Star Healer," she murmured. "Do you wish you had left when you had the chance?" He closed his eyes, relaxing into her embrace. "Never," he whispered, "but I am afraid. What if I have brought danger to your world? What if—" She silenced him with a gentle nuzzle to his neck. Hope is our strongest weapon. You taught me that long ago. She drew him close, her warmth enfolding him, her tails coiling protectively around his waist. We have endured the worst together. We will face what comes, together. Their bond, born in hardship, was now a source of strength. In the quiet hush of their room, Rowan let his fears melt away. They shared a night of gentle intimacy, whispered promises, laughter muffled by her fur, the steady beat of her heart, a balm against the darkness. Syrah's presence was a shield, her love a lifeline. They spoke little, needing only touch and closeness to reaffirm what had been forged in fire. In the early hours, as Syrah drifted to sleep, Rowan lay awake, hope slowly replacing dread. He watched her, the warrior and the healer, the survivor and the leader. Their love was no longer a secret, but a beacon. The next morning, they prepared a message. Together, they composed a story of pain and healing, of trust tested and hope restored. A story meant for strangers, a plea for peace from those who had once been enemies. Rowan's words and Syrah's voice, joined as one, became their gift to both peoples, a seed of understanding, waiting to take root. Rowan and Syrah composed their message at an ancient transmitter, a relic from Sirael's first brush with the stars. It stood at the edge of the city, its spires encrusted with bioluminescent lichen, consoles half swallowed by soft fungal growth. Rowan's hands hovered over the controls, his pulse a wild, anxious beat. The transmitter's core hummed with new life as he powered it on, Syrah's presence a steady anchor at his side. Syrah brushed her tails across his arm, her voice low. Are you ready? He managed a breathless smile. Ready as I'll ever be. He loaded the first file, images and video, raw and unflinching. The sequence opened with Lyra, her, years before, in the sterile dome, pacing in agony, fur matted with sweat, eyes wild with fear and pain. Her snarl reverberated in the memory, but it was her trembling, so small, so unmistakably vulnerable, that hurt the most. Rowan included footage of himself, separated from her by glass, pressing his hand to hers in silent promise. He turned to Syrah. We need to show them everything, not just the pain, but what came after. Syrah nodded, selecting the next files. Here was transformation. Lyra's first serene dances beneath Sirael's glowing canopy. The Shirakai performed before a circle of Corellian children, her tails swirling in perfect control. She moved with purpose, her scars visible yet proud. The children laughed, mimicking her steps. In one sequence, Rowan appeared, guiding her through the basics of human speech, their hands entwined over the word hope scrawled on a slate. Rowan added his scientific notes, voiceover and diagrams overlaid with data. Subject 119, known as Lyra, Corellian genotype. Rapid regeneration dependent on symbiotic Siraelian spores. Removal from her native environment induced cellular decay and neural distress. He included the molecular structure of the spore, rendered in glowing blue and violet. This is the key, he said, voice soft, to her pain and her healing. We should send a code as well, Syrah said, her hand resting on his. Something that any mind, human or Corellian, will recognize. Rowan typed out a string of prime numbers, the oldest bridge between intellects. On the screen, the sequence pulsed. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. When the message was ready, Syrah paused. In the dim glow of the transmitter, she placed her hand gently over Rowan's. The transmitter's surface was cool and slick beneath their joined palms. Together, she whispered, amber eyes bright. This story belongs to both of us. Rowan met her gaze. Let's send it then. No more hiding. With a single motion, they pressed the command. Data spiraled outward in beams of light, across the city, into the sky, and beyond. The whole of Sirael seemed to hold its breath. In homes and council chambers, people gathered to listen. The city's heartbeat slowed, anticipation vibrated in the luminous air. They waited. Minutes ticked by, then an hour. The transmitter's screen remained dark, its signal light pulsing. Rowan paced, nerves taut. Syrah watched the horizon, twin tails wrapped around her ankles in silent tension. Suddenly, the transmitter chirped. A reply had arrived. On the console, a familiar pattern unfurled. A new string of prime numbers, the same universal code. Then, an audio file. Rowan's breath caught as he pressed play. Static cleared, and through the speakers came a voice. His own, younger and raw, trembling with hope and dread. "Hold on, Lyra. I'm trying to help." He remembered the moment, his hand on the glass, her eyes meeting his, the unspoken promise between them. For an instant, he was that man again, desperate and helpless, praying that compassion could cross an impossible divide. Then, a synthesized voice, neutral, gentle, spoke a single word. Understanding. Silence fell. Rowan's vision blurred with tears. His chest ached, old wounds opening and healing at once. "They heard us," he whispered, voice breaking. "They heard everything." Syrah turned to him, pulling him into a fierce embrace. Her purr was deep and resonant, a song of triumph that vibrated through his bones. Around them, the ancient transmitter's glow mingled with the bioluminescent haze of the city. Syrah pressed her cheek to his, her breath warm and steady. "We are free of the past," she said softly. "This is the beginning of something new." Rowan clung to her, his body shaking with relief and joy. "It's real," he murmured. "We did this." Together. Syrah smiled, her tails unfurling in a gesture of hope. "Our story is no longer one of pain or fear," she said. "Now it is about healing and love and the courage to reach for something better." The city exhaled. News of the reply swept through the streets. Children danced beneath the mycelium towers. Elders gathered to share the message. In every home, hope bloomed, a fragile connection becoming the seed of a new era. In the quiet that followed, Syrah and Rowan remained at the transmitter, hands still joined. Their journey, from captivity and distrust to freedom and trust, had become a beacon. The wall between their worlds, once high and unbreakable, was now only memory. Their story had been sent into the darkness, and in return the universe had answered, not with fear, but with understanding and the enduring power of love. This brings our story to a close. Don't forget to hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. Our team will truly appreciate your support. There are plenty more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. See you in the next video.